our minds may become enlightened, our faith be increased, our steps directed towards you. I have to tell you, this was not a pleasant series to put together. Not at all. And one of the things I came across was how incredibly ignorant I am. And so I'm going to ask you to bear with me, because this is not one of those kinds of things that's going to leave us uplifted. It's going to suggest we've got a lot of homework to do, all of us. So bear with me. I'm going to start out with the idea that Homo sapiens as a species have a major flaw, and that is denial. As a species, we think that we are really it. We don't realize when we look at other species how little amount of time we've been around. It turns out our whole idea, for instance, of what Neanderthals were is all wrong. The latest genome shows that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens shared 99.5% of the same genetics. Everything we're finding about those stupid, ugly, stocky, ignorant Neanderthals has been wrong. And we are not interested in learning anything about them, and we should. I might point out, by the way, that Neanderthals have been around 235,000 years longer than we have before they finally passed on. They have a long track record. We don't. Second thing we're in denial about is 98% of us, our chromosomes are chimpanzee. And I've just been reading books lately, so this is all new to me, about primatology. And when you start studying primates, and especially chimps, and the way they operate in troops, a group of chimps, when you look and study this, and look and examine human behavior, your jaw drops. Little things that you may never have expected. You see men, when they're playing sports, somebody will come up and pat somebody on the butt or on the back. Basic chimp behavior. You'll notice when somebody goes to give a speech, for instance, a State of the Union or something like that, people have to touch them. The alpha male in a chimp troop, people have to touch as he walks by. You start looking at behavior which you think is unique to Homo sapiens. That's because you've never studied primatology, you've never studied chimpanzees. They are hierarchical, aggressive, collect things, gather things, get very, very angry, and get extraordinarily territorial. Gee, does this sound familiar? We are in complete denial about that. Also, denial is a serious handmaiden of those who think any of their own country is the greatest country that ever came down the line. Now, I started looking at some things about the United States, and I was dumbfounded about some things that I didn't realize. And I want to share them with you. I don't know if you're aware of this, that 97% of our country is considered rural. 97%. Most of our population lives on the East Coast, the West Coast, and down following the Mississippi River. Think, if you will, of North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming, how big those land masses are. If you total up the total population of North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming, it's 2.2 million. That is 600,000 less than Miami-Dade County. All right, now what I'm trying to suggest is, and let me make it very clear here, I am not putting down people who live in rural areas. Let me make this very clear. I'm just giving information. I had no clue, but I start thinking about that. Think of Idaho. How much of Idaho is really populated? How much of Montana is really populated? Or Nevada? Or New Mexico? Think of vast areas. I remember when I had a congregation in Chicago, I left Park Forest and decided to get in a car and go down the center of the state, and I was an hour outside of greater Chicago, an hour and a half, and it's like the whole world had changed. No matter where you looked, for as far as you could see, soybean fields. I've never seen anything like it. It was like the whole world that way didn't exist. And I'm thinking one time when I did a wedding here in Miami-Dade County, I had to go down to the Chevrolet winery, and I wound up taking some road, and I had no idea where I was. And as far as I could see, it was nearby. The homestead has an airport, by the way. Who knew? And back there, I looked for as far as you could see nothing but green. There wasn't a soul in sight. Yet 20 miles that way was a thriving metropolis. We have no idea, I think most of us, I'll say I had no idea, when you start looking at it, how rural most of our areas. Think of Florida. What's up the center? What is up the center of Florida? You got the coast, but up the center, Sebring in the middle, and all the way up and down. It's a huge area. It's not terribly populated. Okay, let's take a look at our population. 90% of our people go to high school and graduate. But our high schools are listed as 27th best in the world. That low. Some other things that may come as a surprise to you. And by the way, I'm not putting down education or lack thereof. I'm just giving you some statistics. 60% of the people in this country do not have a 2-year degree. 67% do not have a 4-year degree. 91% do not have a master's degree, and 98% don't have a doctorate. Which means to say that if you live first of all, in a rural area, the way you're going to be looking at life is very, very different. Now, let me say something about education. I'm not overly impressed by education. I've met some incredibly educated people who are as ignorant as you can get. Seriously, I have to work. Careful, yes. I'll just simply say that I have been in the academy for a long time and basically underwhelmed many times. That'll probably get me in trouble too. Yet I bet people have been in high school educations and continue to learn and read and read and read and learn, are incredibly educated and street smart. They get things. You know, just because you have a research degree does not mean you get the world. What's that famous quote? You can get straight A's and flunk life. Do you know that quote, Walker Percy? You can get straight A's and flunk life. But when you have a variety of education we have in this country, vast rural areas, what you're getting then, now you see already you have a huge, huge area of the way people process stuff. Somebody who grows up in a rural area who has a minimal education but works hard on a farm is going to have a much different way of processing things around them than somebody who's living in Allapattah. That's not good or bad. It's just trying to point out differences that I don't think most of us get. Did you know that 11% of the people in this country have never left their state? 11%. We have 54% who have never visited more than 10 states in this country. And 40% have never left the United States. Now, if that sounds strange, I have a map test I give to my students every so often, and I hand out a map of the United States. It's blank, except each state has a number. So I said, here are 5 numbers. I want you to tell me what state those numbers are. You do not want, well, I'm going to tell you anyway. The average on this is 2 out of 5. And everybody's looking at everybody, and I say, I don't mean to be one, but you live here. I'm not asking you for counties in England. I'm not asking you for states in Baden-Württemberg, Germany. I'm asking, this is where you live. Everybody's looking like, people get New Mexico, Colorado, and Arizona mixed up. Maine they get New Hampshire, Vermont, somewhere in between there. Where is Kansas exactly, and Oklahoma, and somewhere something else is in there, and people get all mixed up, and it's amazing. Now, this is not a good or bad. I'm trying to explain, if you start looking at the way our country really is, then you begin to see how people have different attitudes. How is your worldview if you grew up in a very, very rural area, and, you know, that's all you know? How is your attitude if you grow up in an incredibly packed area where it's smog and everything else and you're jammed in together? One isn't right or wrong. There are 2 very, very, very different worldviews. Now, here's some other thing. I don't know if you knew this. The 12% of the people in this country are considered living in poverty, and that's using the government standards. Everybody realizes the government standards are way low. Is probably much higher than that. Did you know that means at a minimum 39 million of our residents are living in poverty? I don't know if you knew this, that 88.5% of our residents have no health insurance. That's 27 million people have no insurance whatsoever. Let me tell you how bad this has gotten. I have to take a medicine called Eliquis. A 3-month supply with insurance is $110. If you have no insurance, it's $325 for 1 month. Let me tell you how crazy this is. I went to Cartagena, Colombia. Somehow I had miscalculated, I was dumbfounded by this, my heart transplant medicine, my anti-rejection medicine. They sent me to the store that sells the medicine in Cartagena. The same medicine I'm on, the same amount, the same dosage, was 2/3 less the cost than what it costs here in Florida. These are just some statistics I'm sharing with you. The poverty rate in Miami-Dade County, 20%. 20% according to the government. It is much higher than that when you factor in the low standards of the government. Did you know that 40 to 50%, they've lost track of our residents' rent? 40 to 50% of the residents' rent. You're going into real estate? Just pop this out a minute. We have the worst home ownership in the country, the highest rent rates in the country, and some of the lowest pay rates, some of the lowest salary rates in the country. I don't know about you, that is a recipe for disaster. The average person spends 40% of their paycheck on rent or mortgage. Now, you start looking at these things, this is an America that I had no clue about. I'm sitting out there lolly-dollying in the hammocks in some dream world. I teach at a school. I drive in a Jeep, and where have I been? These are real people, real facts, and real statistics. And when you look at us, we've got rural versus urban culture. Those who travel see one way of looking at the world versus those who don't. And you know, when you get out and see how the other half lives, it's amazing what you learn. You have educational differences, poverty rates, health rates, people who don't have any insurance rates. It's a whole different picture. And I thought, I live here. How did I not know any of this? Colin Woodward, in his book, points out things that you and I may have forgotten, and I certainly did. You know, we talk about the great United States. He said the only time that people get together in the United States is when they vote for something that benefits them. We tend to forget. Puritan New England was incredibly different than aristocratic Virginia. Same time, same place, but terribly different cultures. The only reason they got together is because the English king was going to take part of their money. That's what united them. Other than that, they had nothing in common. The Puritans were nonconformists who made people conform. The letters from the nonconformists in England to the people in New England will singe your hair on fire. They were blistering. What have you done? Meanwhile, the aristocrats in Virginia wanted nothing to do with the people. But when your money is being taken, suddenly, you know, your enemy becomes your best friend. If she's going after our money and I don't like you and I don't like her, she's going after, suddenly we become very good friends. So you get Puritan New England, you get Anglican Virginia. Have you ever thought about who started the frontier in this country? Think about this. I used to teach a course called Religion in the U.S. Think about who went out to the frontier. People who did bad things and were escaping. People who didn't fit in. Did the educated, the elite, etc., go out to the frontier? No. In fact, what were the last institutions built in frontier towns? Churches and schools. People who went out didn't read, didn't write. I'm not knocking them. These are people who settled the frontier. But did they also take things from people who were already on the frontier? That's another thing we don't like to talk about. And finally, here's a thing that influences us, and I hope I'm not boring everybody. This is the kind of thing that I never thought about. If any of you may have heard the phrase Scots or Scots-Irish. What this means is in this country, people who went to the Ulster plantations got along with the Irish very well until the English got after both. And the Irish, here's a very famous thing. What's the difference between a poor Scot and a poor Irish in Ireland? The Scots left, and they came here angry. I don't know if you knew this in Scotland. For 100 years, they had the famous clearances. People were thrown off their land by the landlords. The Scots came here angry. To this day, Woodward looked at voting patterns where the Scots-Irish settled in the United States, central Pennsylvania, parts of Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. They will vote against anything to do with government and authority. Anything. Medicare? No, absolutely not. Anything that would help you, they have an ingrained distrust of anybody with authority, even if they're trying to help you. He said, look at the voting patterns. They haven't changed. I never even thought about that. Because I've got Scots-Irish heritage, and I thought, you know, I see that. If somebody says to me, you must do this, I immediately try to find a loophole. And I'm thinking, I'm in the wrong professions. Teaching and ministry is not a good profession. Yes, all right. Other things I wanted to share with you. Talking about denial about our country. Our country has done some really cool things, but it's not exceptional in terms of being goody, 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 goody. What did we do with the First Nations?
Killed them all.
There was no trail of tears. They didn't cry. The Cherokee made it very clear there would be no tears. That's a white thing. In fact, people said when Andrew Jackson kicked them out and made them go to a land that wasn't theirs, they purposely did not cry and show humbleness or regret. They held up high, and even as they died and they went along, there was no. This trail of tears is a white thing, trying to show that they felt bad. No, they were angry and they had dignity, and they died with dignity. We don't like to talk about that. What about manifest destiny? It is the manifest destiny of whites to take over the world. God's given us the right. What kind of theology did we come up with that? And nobody likes to talk about that now because they realize, oh, that's bad. Nobody likes to talk about that. And what about the Fugitive Slave Act? When we could go get slaves, half the people they hunted down were freed men. The Civil War. What happened after the Civil War? Andrew Johnson became our president, and what was he? He was anti-Civil War. What about, did you know there are schools in Texas that don't refer to slavery? They call it a peculiar institution. I'm not joking. What about lynchings, the KKK? And what about the immigration behavior? Separating little kids, putting little kids away, detention center down here in our own backyard. No, Mats, did you read about what they found? The Inspector General went in and found kids were sleeping on cement floors. Some didn't even have a blanket over them. The way we treated people here, you would have been appalled about if it had been anybody in your family. So yes, we've had some good things, but if you want to know the way the country really is and why people vote the way they vote, it's important to know who we are. So where am I leaving us with this? I think it's fair to say the country's done some good things. We've got gay marriage. We've got civil rights, Medicare, and Social Security. We are giving women more and more authority, and more glass ceilings are being broken. There are now women bishops in the Methodist Church, the Lutheran Church, and the Episcopal Church, of all things. Women are breaking glass ceilings right and left. But we still have major divides. We still have racism. We still have women learning less. We still have anti-LGBTQ attitudes. And we still have a minority trying to focus on us of telling us what we should do, how we should live, and how our life should be. Okay, what I'd like us to do then, as we end this sermon, is I'd like to make some observations. And it's not a pretty observation. Number one, we really don't know much about our species. We really don't know how Homo sapiens operate. And the 98% you can't get rid of. Now, I have to figure out how I can do this, because I know somebody reading this, I know human beings being the way they are will mistranslate this. So I'll see if I can do this the best I can. When you see an alpha male in a troop behave, it is very, very clear when you see other alpha males. You want to know, how did Putin get to be Putin? How did the person in Hungary get to be getting hungry? How did the person who's running Brazil get to be in Brazil? Look at how alpha males take over and how they cower people, especially if you're lesser males. And you want to be around a bigger male who has power because you don't have much. The only way you get rid of an alpha male is if you find another alpha male or another alpha female who are more powerful that can do it in, or the alpha male does himself in by such bad behavior he can no longer be tolerated. Does that say anything to anybody? All right, number 2. We don't know much about our country. Before we go with grandiose ideas about politics, we need to know who we are. We need to know what our education is, what our backgrounds are, who's rural, who's this. I don't know if any of you are like me. I'm ignorant. I cannot believe. I'm one of those 2% who has a doctorate, and I can't believe I didn't know this much. Did any of you? Please tell me I'm not the only one who's ignorant here. Were any of you surprised by some of the statistics I read? I was absolutely dumbfounded. I kept on thinking, you're educated, you don't know a thing. Now I get to have an idea of where people are coming up with some of the ideas and some of the feelings they express. We are divided, we are angry, and we're upset. And haven't we always been that way? When you look at the United States and are really honest, we've always been that way. New England and Virginia have never gotten along. Did the Civil War really ever settle anything between the North and the South? When you think about it, when you take the southern states, are they the same as New York or Pennsylvania? No, I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying they're different. The Midwest has, I don't know if you've ever lived in the Midwest. The Midwest is a very calm place. I had a congregation in Chicago, but it was South Chicago, and it was very Midwestern. I come from the Northeast. I was never aware of geographic differences. In the Northeast, you never stop. Not healthy. You get to the Midwest, calm and relaxed. I was going to die. So calm and relaxed, very sweet, sweet people. Then the coast, the left coast, they go the West Coast, it's totally different. And then I haven't even got to New Mexico or Arizona. So I'm just saying that we've always had different parts of the country, and we've tried to gloss over it. So my job for all of us is, we need to ask ourselves, if we're going to sing This Little Light of Mine, and we're going to look for this country and what it is, what role does our faith play? Why do we sing This Little Light of Mine? Why are we here? What can we bring to all of this? What informs who we are? What informs who we are as people? What informs who we are, what we process around us? What are we going to do as we look at our society today? What gives us the stuff to deal with it? And that is my next sermon. Amen.